Joe Putignano is the best-selling author of Acrobaddict, a former Cirque du Soleil acrobat and personage, a Broadway and Metropolitan Opera performer, as well as a television and film star and model, and I should say a teacher. When I came to his class, I could tell straight away that there was an amazing story behind this very humble gymnastics teacher, and I had to get him on the show. Joe, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction.
So, where to begin? Maybe with your childhood, if you can just tell us how you became an acrobat.
I was actually watching the 1984 Olympics. I was 7 years old. I think it was Mary Lou Retton or Bart Connor. And they were just tumbling during warm-ups. And I knew, like, in that moment, like I was, as if I was struck by lightning, I was going to be a gymnast. And I tried copying exactly what they did. And so I just pulled the cushions off and just started flipping over and over and over. And that's how it began. But I honestly was obsessed with it. You know, like a little kid who's hears a musical instrument for the first time and they know that this is what they're going to do. It was that, like, deep-seated in me.
Wow. Had you done gymnastics or anything before?
No, nothing.
So where did you go from there?
Well, my parents noticed that I couldn't stop and I wouldn't stop. They kept telling me to, like, leave the couch alone. And something inside of me was like, keep doing it, keep doing it. So they knew they had to take me to gymnastics class. And I went, and then by then I could already do a backflip because I just kept trying over and over. So the coach saw it and he put me on the team, and that started, like, fast, competing and training, you know.
Wow. So what did, like, a day look like when everyone else was at school? What were you doing?
Earlier, it wasn't as many hours as it became later on, because you realize when you get better, they make you train more hours, of course. But a regular day would be get out around 3 for school, and then I'd be at the gym from like 3 to 8:30. So it wasn't that I had to get up any earlier, it's just that I missed all the cartoons and all the, like, you know, cool TV shows that everyone was talking about at school.
And how old were you? About 10 or?
I started at 7, 8, yeah.
And then I guess weekends were no cartoons?
No, weekends we competed. They're big competition times, yeah. Which I kind of didn't mind because I didn't have to go to church. Yeah. And either we were competing or there'd be something, you know, we'd have practice on the weekends, stuff like that.
And was everyone quite serious? Like, did you have this picture of becoming an acrobat in Cirque du Soleil? Was that your goal?
No. It's interesting. The first time I saw that show, I think it was on HBO of all weird places, because it's usually a touring show, and I could not believe these people could do, especially the contortionists. Like, they could actually do these things with their body. I remember being little and thinking, like, Mom, are you born this way? Like, how does this happen? And she didn't know. She was just like, yeah, I think you're going to be born that way. So that seemed so far away from anything I'd ever do. The Olympics was really what I was aiming for. Mm-hmm. Like most gymnasts, like, that is our one and only. And it's very difficult if we don't make it, because then we have nothing else, you know. Yeah.
So what was the atmosphere like with the coaches, with your teammates? Was it competitive? What was the, I guess, nutrition and the fitness level of things like?
That's a good question. The competition between the other athletes was definitely serious. They were your friends, but competition day, they were your enemies. And it was a real delicate balance on how to handle that. Because my best friend Dan actually was my biggest competitor. We were always neck and neck, so I wanted him to do really well, but then sometimes I wanted him to fall, which is terrible, but that's competition. Us and the coaches, it was very strict. We did anything they told us to do because we wanted to be the best. And as far as men's gymnastics goes with nutrition, we didn't have any. It was like never anything that was implemented or spoken about. But for the women's team, that was something they were very serious about.
And in what way did you know how they were dealing with the women in terms of nutrition?
Yeah, because the girls were always complaining they were hungry and they have to do this diet, and it's really unfortunate because their bodies peak, or their gymnastics peaks around 16, 17, and men it's much later. So I don't really know the best way to handle nutrition for like girls gymnastics at that age. It's a difficult, thing to do.
But they were basically starved.
I would say, yeah, because the athletes back then, you have to realize that when we see them on TV now, to get the muscle and the earlier women's gymnastics, they were very, I don't want to say frail, but they were more on the thinner side. So there was definitely this look of leanness, and now it's like healthy power, which is great.
So when did you realize that the Olympics wasn't for you, or maybe it still is?
Oh, geez, no. I found out I'd gone to the Olympic Training Center when I was 11 and when I was 13, and this was amazing. This was really an honor in itself. That alone was something I'll never forget. When I was 15 and 16, I started to realize that everyone I was better than started to catch up over time. And so I was like, uh-oh. And I think that's when I actually began to accept I might not be going to the Olympics. And it was a very dark period because that's all there is in my head. I didn't. So if I didn't go to the Olympics, then I'm going to be a failure every day for the rest of my life. And that's how I felt and thought about it. And I definitely brought that to a very dark place at that time.
And so you were 15, 16?
Yeah.
And so had you thought about Cirque du Soleil at this stage or not?
No. This was a strange thing. I'm from Boston, Mass. And where I lived, no one ever told me you could perform. Like it was nothing that coaches ever spoke about. I didn't know it until I was here in New York City, until there was a poster in my face that said Gymnasts Wanted. And that was when I was like 20. So it was literally just Olympics. Maybe you could get you into a college, like scholarship or something like that. But other than that, there was nothing else to fall back on.
Okay. So you moved to New York, and when did you see that was going to be an option?
I was 20 years old, and I saw a poster. It was actually for Disney, because they have stunt shows down in at Disney and I think Epcot too. But there was like audition posters just hanging outside, and I was like, oh, I had no idea you could do this. And I had seen some Broadway shows, and I saw them tumble, but I didn't put two and two together. Like I thought I had to be a trained dancer and all this stuff, and so then I started asking questions about it.
Okay. So just to backtrack then, you said you went to a bit of a dark place when you were 16. Yeah. So what happened during those 4 years between 16 and 20 before you realized about the options?
A lot. A lot happened. Well, it was a really strange, I'm not going to sit here and blame my parents or anybody else.
I'll go on.
Right? I hate you, Mom. No. We owned a restaurant and a bar, and it was right near my gymnastics place. So it was rush hour when I was supposed to go home. It was the busiest time in the restaurant. That's when, my parents needed to be there. So they couldn't drive me home, so I'd sit at the bar all night long and do my homework. So all of my adult conversations were with drunks. And my parents were very, very bad alcoholics. And I would sit there and, do my homework till like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. So I didn't really have a very healthy support, or I wasn't taught any coping tools on how to manage things. So around 15 and 16, when a normal drinking, age, I would say, in the U.S. for kids to experiment, it came around. I had my first drink, which is interesting because I was so, all about eating. I was about eating healthy and getting...
And performing well and...
Yeah, because I would never put anything in front of my gymnastics. But I remember having my first beer, and that deep-seated almost monster in my head that was like, you have to be the best, you have to do this, like a quiet, it was like a solution. And I had never felt this, and I was like, wow, like this is the answer to my problems, and I want more of it. I want more of it now. So I started drinking like alcoholically, like right away.
And was that because you sort of given up on Olympics?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point in being able to perform?
Yeah.
Alcohol's my answer now. I don't need gymnastics. Was that sort of the attitude?
Absolutely. That coupled with, just that it feels good. You're young, you're a teenager. It definitely created I would say a stronger hold on me than what it normally would do for, just a regular teenager. Because I was, in a way, I needed to be medicated or maybe have a therapist or some sort of healthy way to deal with the stress, the pressure, the realization that, this dream I've been working at most of my life already is not going to happen.
And is it your personality as well? That person that can achieve such a high level of acrobatics and gymnastics, is that same person that can taste a beer and go, I need more of that? That feels good?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, that's who I am. It's interesting because, your first question is, how did you get started in gymnastics? That to me was like alcoholic in a way. Where I became obsessed. Like I wanted more of it. I felt good. I felt free. I felt like the wind. And and nothing could stop me. Like my parents were like, don't do that. I was like, no, I'm going to do this. So I definitely realized the energy of passion and obsession. They live on the same plane, Depends how we choose to use it. Really.
So you're basically addicted to acrobatics, and then you became addicted to alcohol and other substances as well?
Yeah, it was the 90s rave era. I don't know. So here was that dance music kind of uprising, and it was so opposite of gymnastics. We were like clean cut, and this was a place where everyone was pierced head to toe, and it was like heaven crashed into the earth. I wasn't getting judged. I wasn't getting scores. And yeah, I ran into that scene, and literally became one overnight. Like every part of my body pierced. And
it was freedom for you, was it? A sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like what I feel like when people who are religious, who say what church is to them, that's what it felt like. It was like, oh, I belong somewhere. Yeah.
And so at what stage did you sort of move to New York and find acrobatics? Were you still an alcoholic? Were you still an addict?
Yeah, I did go to college. I tried, and I competed on the men's gymnastics team. I tried pulling it together, and that didn't work so well. I ended up discovering more drugs and more, and I had a severe cocaine problem then. And benzodiazepine, Klonopin addiction, really bad. And I was getting prescriptions from my psychiatrist, and I was manipulating her. I was doing everything that an addict does. And I was really good at it because I looked, kind of innocent. And I was really good at manipulating people. So I was doing very bad things. I got kicked out of college twice, and I ended up homeless, and that's how I ended up in New York City. When you're young, you can kind of pull the homeless thing. You can make it work because you can sleep on someone's couch for a week, but I was even messing that up because it was like, I was doing everything addict, and people, they were like, you can't do it. So I ended up coming here to Paterson, New Jersey, and there's a homeless shelter called Eva's Village, and that is where I ended up staying for a while, and then slowly started to get my life back together. Not sober, though. I started to realize I was trying to have control around something that's uncontrollable. If I take too many pills, I won't be able to go to work. So I have to figure out how to do this and still survive. And that's where some discipline came in around my drug use, which is funny because.
And so were you working at the time then?
Yes, not for a while. Then I got a job as a waiter on 76 on Broadway, and that's where I discovered actually my greatest love and my greatest enemy, which was heroin. This is funny, of all places. One of the waiters was high, and I was like, what do you want? And
give me some of that.
Yeah, and it was the only one I hadn't tried, and it's interesting because throughout, I had already been to a few rehabs. People would warn me, like, you know, what are you in here for? And, oh, heroin, don't ever do it. And I was like, oh yeah, I won't. And as soon as I had the option to do it, I was, yes, sign me up, because it's the last one. I've done all this experimentation with all of them. I need to know what it's like. And yeah, and it's exactly what they say. If you haven't done it, don't do it, because you'll probably like it.
And especially for someone like yourself, or, you know, anyone that's so amazingly driven to be able to excel.
Yes. And the problem with that, and they are finding there's a link between not only addiction and athletes, but opiates itself, because we're in a lot of pain. If you've lifted your whole life, if you've danced, if you've done gymnastics, and you take something, even if you don't notice your pain, and this removes it, you feel amazing. And then the next day it's gone, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize how bad my back hurt. So now you got to keep taking it, and that's...
It's interesting you brought that correlation in between athletes and drugs, because, you know, this podcast is all about bringing health into fitness, and it's amazing how such a fine line between the two, isn't it?
Yeah. But I have seen this before. I have a friend that was very close to making the Olympics as well, much closer than I. And he's like spiraling down the abyss of alcoholism now because of the same issue. He, you know, had this one goal, it didn't happen, and he has the kind of personality, he can do anything, but it's as if the addiction lives inside of him, you know, that drive. It's sad. So I'm hoping as time goes on and we see more of this, we're going to figure out healthier ways to support our athletes, to recognize addiction behaviors before, you know, they turn into full-on addiction.
And I want to come back to that point about how to help them. But can you just briefly explain? So you got here, you discovered heroin, you went further down the hole. Was that before or after you started Cirque du Soleil?
No, that was way before. I did heroin for about 7 years. I didn't work out. I did nothing. So all of my athletic stuff was gone, all my flexibility. And I like to mention that because this is, we are talking about athletics, because I was someone that was very flexible and I let it all go away. I mean, I had no more splits, and I got it back. So I like to tell people this, because if I can do it, you can do it.
But also too, that's muscle memory. It's actually easier to get it back. I had a double hip operation, lost all my flexibility, got it back easily.
Yeah. And people don't know that though. So I always tell them,
that's
like,
really
no,
good to know.
you can do a lot more than you think.
So you mean to say that you saw these brochures and you weren't in condition?
No.
So what did you do?
Oh my God. Well, I did end up going. It was really sad. It's Chelsea Piers, a gymnastics place over here. I went, I was high, and I saw, at the audition, I saw all these people I used to compete against. And now I was tattooed. I had like a bright red mohawk, and I was so ashamed. I was like, they can't see me like this. And I know they had heard I'd been kicked out of college for drugs, because gymnastics is a very small community. So I left. I was like, and it hurt even more. It made the Olympic thing just, you know, burn. It was like and that just made me use, and I got a very interesting job at the New York Times. Someone had, I don't remember how I got the job.
They were just like looking for a drug addict, alcoholic,
ex-gymnast. Well, it's a weird thing. I don't remember. I think the person, it was a friend of a friend. They needed someone to cover for them in the style department, and I did, and they liked me. And so that from age 24 and up, I worked at the Times, which was fantastic because I was, you know, working as a waiter, which is very difficult, and this was a place to grow. So I had given up on any sort of athletic, acrobatic thing. It was completely gone. Now I wanted to be a writer, you know, the journalism world. And I only bring the Times up because they actually were the ones to kind of save my life. I was 27. I couldn't take it anymore. Like, I was just like, I thought I was going to die of a drug overdose, but I was still kicking, and I was in so much pain. So I went to their employee assistance program, and I was like, I need help. And they weren't shocked because it's New York City and there's lots of addicts everywhere. And they sent me to a rehab that actually worked. Something clicked. And what clicked was the counselor. She's like, what do you like to do in life? And it's like, nothing. Drugs. And she's like, well, no, what did you do before that? I said, I was a gymnast, but I'm a failure. I can't. What do you mean you're a failure? She's like, why don't you go and do it? And I'm like, no, you have to compete and you have to, she's like, why don't you do it for fun? And it was just, I was like, could I? Like, well, won't that open up like Pandora's box for me? And I don't know, like the way she said it, it was one of those things when someone says something that like bypasses your brain and touches your heart, And immediately I went up to my room and started doing handstands and splits, and I felt it. I felt this like, this is my way out of this.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And you're still at the New York Times.
Yeah. So I was in this rehab for like 21 days, and I started doing push-ups, handstand splits. And this is when I'm at the Times. I went back to work, and one woman stopped me and she's like, did you just get your braces off? I said, no, I didn't have braces, because no one had ever seen me smile. Right. But I was sober now.
And so this is like 10 years after you'd done any physical exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, about 7, 8. Yeah. I was about 27, 28. And I was smoking cigarettes basically. I would still go to the gym a little bit. I didn't lose it all, but I was not an athlete at all. And this is when I was sitting at work. I was bored. I was on the internet, and I Googled contortion, and that's when I saw this guy, Jonathan Nosan, and I was like, I think I could do a few of those things. And I took a class from him, and that's really what started me back on this path. It was like watching the Olympics all over again as a kid. It like struck me like lightning. I was obsessed. I was like, this is what I got to do. And instead of my lunch break at the Times, I would run out, go get high, shoot up, go back to work. Now I would stack up the Xerox paper and put my leg on it and stretch for the whole hour. And so I was still acting like an addict. I just switched seats, basically.
So you just replace your addiction.
Yeah.
So often when someone wants to give up a habit, they say the best thing to do is just to replace it with something else.
Yeah.
That's a bit more healthy or whatever. Would you say, though, I mean, let's not compare heroin and gymnastics. I'm probably thinking that maybe gymnastics is a better addiction to have. But would you say, though, that just the actual addiction itself, no matter what it is quite, I don't know, how would you describe it?
Well, I say addiction is the most powerful energy I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like, it is the kind of, and it's not good or bad, that's our point of view, because in my life, if I've directed it towards the right thing, it's gotten me to do things I didn't think I was capable of ever doing. But if you have an addiction, it can also run in the other direction where you really don't want to do this. Like, you don't. Like, and you're up the night before and you're like, I am not doing this thing tomorrow, whatever it is. And the next day you're powerless and you're doing it and you're like, what the heck is wrong with me? So that kind of energy, it's almost like beyond human control. I mean, and that's the way in sort of 12-step recovery we look at it. Like, when we say we're powerless, because it's that powerful. So in my opinion, like, we're all going to have addictions. It's better to choose one that enriches lives, it's not toxic for you. Because even sports can be toxic, even overtraining. I've had overtraining.
Absolutely, but as an addict of exercise, I mean, you must see lots of people that just overtrain. I mean, even someone that isn't a professional, even myself, I found a stage where I just loved exercise so much that it gives you that feeling. And so once you get past that certain amount, you can keep going, and then and then you need to do more in order to get that feeling. Yeah. So it's probably like drugs; you need to do more.
Same thing. Yeah.
So is that healthy for you? That type of addiction?
Well, I mean, it's better than heroin, and I would say yes because now, being 40, I'm able to take care of myself a little bit better. But I've had the same situations of overtraining and been injured and like, no, I gotta finish my workout, or sick. I'll be sick and go to the gym. Where today I don't do that. I have better self-care, which is also in itself like important for nutrition. You lift better when you're taking care of yourself.
But why now do you have better self-care? Like back, say 20 years ago when you're addicted to exercise, you just would have injured your foot and just kept going. Why now? Is it because you've done rehab? Is it because your self-worth has changed and you feel that being a gymnast isn't the only thing that you're amazing at and that you've got more self-worth? What do you think it is?
Wow, that's a good question. And all of your answers actually fit. I would definitely say part of the rehabilitation, part of 12-step, definitely going into a spiritual lifestyle, I try to, which has allowed me to, like you said, look at things from a different point of view where gymnastics isn't the only thing. Nothing is the only thing. All these are forms, and forms are unstable. So life is going to have ups and downs, and it's me that has to learn to accept and bend with it. Where before, I think I had this, I want to say, not control. I was trying to control, like, this is how my life's going to turn out, and I'll do whatever it takes for it to happen. I realized no matter how bad I want something to happen, it's not going to happen. So it's easier to just let go. Yeah.
So now do you look at things and go, well, that's in my control, so I can do something about it, and that's not, so I don't want to even try?
Yeah. Well, no, I wouldn't say I don't want to try, but if things are in my control, I try to make little tiny adjustments within a day if there's a goal I want. Just small ones, because if I do something too big, the old addict comes back and I'm like, this is too hard, I quit. Little things each day to help me towards that goal, and if I find something I don't have control, I try to use the spiritual principle of just acceptance. This is the way it is, something I can do about it, and I have to accept it.
So you said you become a bit more spiritual. In what way?
Oh, a lot of ways. I realized my addiction, it's different for a lot of people, was an issue of where I was searching for something. You can say that about a lot of addicts. It's they call it a low-level search for spirituality, because even when I was talking about gymnastics and drugs, there was something that I felt was this powerful energy, something that I was searching for. And now, like, I've researched a lot of it. I do my meditations and stuff just so I can quiet the thoughts, the negative thoughts. Because a lot of these thoughts, especially for gymnastics, we're judged, we actually get a score. And in a way, those are your character defects, right? As if someone was saying, like, you stood up, you perform, and they're showing it not just to you, but all your friends. Everyone can see your failures. Over the years, that starts to, like, bleed into every facet of your life. So the negative self-talk in my head was always like, oh my God, you're failing. What are you doing? Like, you're a junkie. You're never going to get better. Like, always, this was the normal sound in my head. And for me, like, spirituality has, the thoughts still come in, but I know they're just thoughts, I don't have to listen. And that's a huge, huge difference for me from what I used to be like as a teenager.
But how did you get to that?
That took, which we call like hitting rock bottom, that took hitting several rock bottoms. Or like the death of the ego. I had to fail. I don't want to use the word fail. I had to fall apart on so many levels that I had to surrender. I love the term surrender, because if we think about it, it's like you take, if you've been caught, you have to surrender. Say you're at war, you take your weapon, you put it on the ground, and you wait for instructions, from whoever. And that's like what I did. The weapon, my weapon was drugs. So I put them down, and you know, I had nowhere to go. So I was like, what do I do now? And luckily, it was either like I had to go to a lot of meetings, 12-step meetings, and it was there that I found other people, like in athletics, actually doing it. You know, they were staying sober. Their lives were changing. They were helping people. They became honest. Like addicts aren't honest because we're full of shame. We want to hide everything. So I started to do what they did, and that started to work. And I think it actually changed, really changed the person I always was, but didn't know how to be. You know, if that makes sense. Because I know inside of me, like, there's a good-hearted person, despite the negative, you're a junkie voice. You know?
That's really interesting. So, Joe, I mean, I know it's so easy now to look back and go, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But if you could see your younger self, let's imagine you met a guy in the street who was 20 and he was pretty much going through exactly what you were going through. And you looked at him and thought, I want to save you 20 years of heartache. Do you think it would even be possible to save someone, or do you think they need to go through it? And if it is possible, how would you be able to help? And I guess I'm asking because our listeners probably aren't necessarily drug addicts, but they probably are addicts. As you mentioned, a lot of people are addicts in some way.
Yeah.
Or they've got children that potentially could go down this track as well. And let's face it, it's just a really strong person can become an addict.
Oh, yeah.
So what I would consider an amazing attribute, amazing characteristic that sets you apart from all these people can also send you down the wrong path. So how would you, I guess, advise people to help someone close to them that was going through the same thing? Or how would you help a younger Joe?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, there is a thing they say, you have to let them hit rock bottom, meaning they really have to suffer, because no one's going to put down their weapon, as I said, surrender, unless they've reached that point of pain. If drugs or whatever behavior, whatever exercise, if it's working for you, you're not going to stop. I like to think of it like this. Right? If the universe isn't going to give you a bag of gold if it wants you to stop something. It's going to give you a bag of pain. You know, then you're going to hear it. You're going to be like, oh, geez. So I like to think of the addiction as a call. That's like, you need to look at what you're doing. And I can't give that to anybody. So if I saw someone suffering, what I actually try to do is I tell them my story. Like, that's all I can do is be honest, because I can tell them there's an easier, softer way, because there is. And it's difficult in the beginning. The earliest sober days and stopping any addiction is really tough. That's why relapse is so prevalent. But on the other hand, we have to let them go through it to reach that point, because the choice, it has to be theirs. Like, they have to be the one to say, I need help. Otherwise, like, we see people who go to rehab for their husband or wives and they relapse. So they unfortunately have to fall apart. But we are learning a lot through addiction, and we're learning a lot of different ways. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Intervention, but they have a fantastic way at addressing people with addiction, and that's to come together with love versus shame. Like here in the U.S., we like to put people in jail and punish them. It's probably not the best way to go, because you're going to push an addict into it even more. If you come with love and compassion and a solution, they might listen, you know? It's like, because we can clearly see this person doesn't want to do what they're doing. But we're just not there yet as a society. We're very judgmental and punishing. So for anyone that has kids going through this, I'm going to say something that my teenager would hate, but you got to kind of get involved in their private life, and I hate to say that, if you suspect it. And now on one hand, it's like, will that push them even further? Because they won't, you went through my stuff, or if they have a journal, but you can save someone's lives. And the opiate epidemic in the U.S. is, especially with young kids, is awful right now.
But coming back to your situation, did your parents get involved, or were they too far?
They tried. They tried to get involved, but here's the tricky part. If you're drinking a ton, and then you go to your, kids, and you're like, you shouldn't be doing this. That's not going to work.
They weren't perhaps the best role model for you.
Yes.
But let's assume they were a good role model, or you had a child and they were you didn't drink. And would you suggest that you should get really involved with the child and just give them a lot of love?
I do, yeah, because when a person's life is at stake, I think it's...
But wouldn't the child at hand just rebel? Wouldn't younger you, even if you did have that role model parent, wouldn't you have just rebelled?
I know I would have, because I did that with everything. But I'm thinking if there was support, like for my own family, there was a lot of shame because of their alcoholism. So like my mom's closet, for instance, was full of vodka bottles, like empty ones, because if she put them all in the trash, like we would hear them clinging. So the shame makes you like hide them, right? And we all know they're in there. So we would have the pink elephant in the room that we all danced around. And I'm wondering if there wasn't that entity and you felt like warmth and compassion from your parents, if you might listen. But I don't know, like that's something that I don't come from that. It's not my history. So I just know the shame and how to, and having the shame being an addict. I'll always carry that.
But what if your parents helped you realize that you're so much more than a gymnast?
That would have been cool.
Once again, we're not blaming them, but I'm just wondering
no,
if you change your self-worth, because I see you now today, and to me, you're much more than your body. Your gentle sort of approach to life, and your, I didn't have to ask you if you got braces because I see you smile all the time, and now I find out that you're moving into a different profession, and I guess I want to ask you a bit about that. So tell me, what are you doing?
Oh, and that's scary too. Nursing, actually, and I go back to school in May, and a lot of people ask me, nurses are around a lot of prescription drugs. I'm handing them out. And am I worried about that? And yes and no, because drugs are so available. I live in New York City, can get them delivered here in 10 minutes. I am doing this because through 12-step, I realized I absolutely love helping people. Like, it's the coolest thing to see people not feel well and to get them feeling better. So this just feels natural. It feels like what I'm supposed to do. I'm terrified to do it because it's the unknown, but it's more the excited kind of terrified. Yeah.
And do you think looking outside yourself and helping others makes your problem more insignificant, and you then become so selfless that you don't even want to take drugs?
Yes. And that's that's what in 12-step we're supposed to do, a lot of service. Well, it's a suggestion. And that's what they say keeps us sober. So what I've learned, if I'm feeling really sad, don't dwell in my own sadness. Go find somebody who might be alone. Just ask, say, how are you doing? Because it takes me out of me, and exactly what you said. And then my sadness is gone. Hopefully theirs is. And yeah.
And you just realize that your life actually is way better than theirs. And so it makes you sort of happy.
Yeah, it's a great job. I'm a little nervous. I have done one semester already. I'm in the accelerator program. And it was extremely tough because it's about 2.5, 3 years of nursing school into 16 months. So it's a lot of work, but it's cool because, like athletics, you're thrown into it.
I mean, I don't even understand why you're slightly nervous, because quite frankly, I've seen a lot of people become nurses, but not many people become acrobats in Cirque du Soleil. So I'm thinking that might be slightly harder. So like it's going to be a piece of cake for you, I have no doubt. But actually, I wanted to ask you a bit more about that. So you joined Cirque du Soleil. Were you an addict then, or were you sort of in rehab? Where were you at? And then what happened?
No, I did perform here in New York City at the Metropolitan Opera House where I was a heroin addict, which was really crazy because the lead singer, this opera called Turandot, it's Puccini, I believe, she was a recovering heroin addict, and it was on the cover of the New York Times, so I can talk about this. I'm not breaking her anonymity. And it was crazy because I'd be on stage, I'd tumble, I'd lay down, literally having just shot up, like high, in front of thousands of people, and then she'd come out and sing, and she was like the voice of sobriety. She was beautiful, and just like it was like the heavens, and it was just the most surreal moment because I felt like I was dying, and this woman's like singing for her life. The period where I was at the Met and a few other jobs, I was high as an acrobat. However, when I got clean, 2007, Cirque was 2010. So I was sober, I was good, which really helped because I could not have done that job on drugs. It was so physically demanding. I don't think really anybody on our show used this. It was that you had to be really alert. Your energy level had to be super high, which helped a lot, actually, stay sober. And by then, this is very important. If anybody does have an addiction out there, the obsession does go away over time, They don't really tell you that. They say it could, but it does. You get better. So maybe it might take a year or 2 years, but you actually don't want to use at a certain point.
Especially if you're performing really hard every day.
Yeah.
And so what you perform then pretty much full time from 2010 to when? 2000?
Well, actually, it was 2009 to 2013. And then I had to leave because I tore both rotator cuffs, ankle, which was really difficult because I have to have surgery and I'm an opiate addict. What am I going to do? And this was pretty cool. I was really lucky because Dr. Sanjay Gupta from CNN heard about my story and asked if he would follow me through surgery. And at first I was like, no, I like, what if I relapse? I don't want to relapse on TV. And then someone's like, you could help somebody. You could actually figure out a different way to handle pain post-op. So I said yes, and they were great. And I had really good medical care because CNN was
awesome.
There. So.
And it forced you not to go back to the drugs, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I really feel like if I wanted to use, I would have. It's just who I am. But I didn't want to. And they gave me things that worked. Acupuncture worked. Tylenol, believe it or not, worked. And there's a few other things like gabapentin, which wasn't narcotic, that helps the pain a lot.
And so how fit and healthy were the acrobats that you worked with, and what was the day in the life of?
Oh my God, they were so incredible. They were like Olympians, and I say incredible in a way that's also kind of sick, like like driven to the point of madness, and you have to be. For instance, we had a juggler, and if he dropped his, juggling balls or his clubs, whatever it was that day, he'd punish them. He'd put them in the corner. And so you're not dealing with because I know it's crazy that I'm just trying to paint a picture of how driven these people are because they've done this work for so many years. It's everything to them. They're outstanding. They can do things that hardly anyone can do. So there's a level of insanity, but there's also a level of just wonder to be around. Like such strong, dedicated people who will never miss a day of work. Their body comes first. Therefore, when injury does plague us, it's like a bad time. We beat ourselves up. It's a negative self-talk. And to get back to what a day was like, it was grueling. Where even though we did the show every day, you'd still have to have rehearsals. You still have to have tech. So you were in the tent all day long. About 10 to 12 shows a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it was tough.
That's really tough. And what was the, health of all of the acrobats? Were they healthy? Were they sleeping well? Were they resting, recovering?
The cool thing about Cirque was we actually had nutritionists come. We could ask them questions. They'd come to the show often. We had our own kitchen, and they would always try and change things, and they would have some healthy options. They got healthier as we went along because we would complain about it because everybody wanted to be their best. And our physical therapist traveled with us, and she was vegan, and she was huge into nutrition. She was a good support in helping all of us. So that side of nutrition side and the self-care was really strong. And I was lucky where my show where the athletes were a little bit older, so we didn't have a lot of partying. There was a lot of families. So it was a nice, quiet experience.
Wow, that sounds good. And so when you got injured, was it almost like a relapse? Did you feel like, oh no, I've lost my self-worth again? This is what I do. This is who I am?
Oh,
or did you feel...
I'm still going through that because, most of my life I've made a living off somewhat physicality, like what I could do, sometimes what I look like. And I turned 40, it's changing. And I didn't think it would be this difficult. But, as we were saying before, acceptance, surrender. There's nothing I can do about this. Like, all the drugs in the world can't stop aging. So to have my self-worth and identity into acrobatics, and now to have it be gone from injury, that's why I moved into nursing. But I know for a lot of people, and I have friends, dancers here on Broadway, they've reached their prime, they're injured, they don't know what to do, and I know what that feels like. It's still there because we identify ourselves as
your body, right?
Yeah.
And you said something to me that really hit home, and it was like, when you're a nurse, you're covered. We can't see your body. We don't know that you've got an amazing body.
Right.
All we care about is that you look after us and save our life, and that's where we see your worth.
Yeah.
And does that then change the way you feel? And have you experienced that yet?
Yeah, the scrubs that I had, it's really funny. They're a little oversized. I'm sure you've seen scrubs, and everybody looks kind of like a Pop-Tart in it. And this is crazy, but this company wanted me to model for their new scrubs, and they were perfectly form-fitted, and they were like, and so I was like, awesome, I get to show my work. But I went to the hospital, and the other nurses were like, no. like this isn't a fashion show. This isn't about looking good. Like, you're going to have blood on you. And I got it. I heard it. I was a student. I didn't know. And I was doing it for the company. And I think it's great. I think people should be able to go to work and feel good about themselves, especially if they worked really hard. But nursing is very selfless, and I think it's perfect for me because it's going to be a way to not dissolve the ego or the vanity, and we all have that, and I'll admit it, but it'll be a way to transition into it, and more about caring for people is more important now at this stage of my life than what I look like and what I can do athletically. It has to be.
And even though you say that, I'm sure there's something in your head saying, go and exercise, go and make yourself look good.
Oh, yeah.
How do you fight that? How do you get away from that? How do you, I guess, detach from that? And what are your tricks? And I know you don't have all the answers because you're still going through it.
Yeah, no, as you just said that, I felt it. And I felt it tense up. I'm like, crap, even though I just said I'm going to be all selfless and not worry about that, I can tell I am. I know I'm going to have to exercise just for my own self-care. It's still the thing that got me healthy from drugs and alcohol. It's still the thing that's going to keep me being healthy, I hope, because it's like my church. Like, I love the gym. So I know I'm going to have to do that, but yeah, it's going to be a process. I know it's going to be difficult. Just changing.
And do you feel too that, like, you've almost got to, I've almost got to keep other people happy. This is how people see me. And I've seen your pictures of you doing acrobats, and everyone can go and look on YouTube and see what you do. And also I've seen, your modeling, and amazing. But do you identify that with that and feel that you have to live up to that?
Yeah. And
does that affect your health and your fitness?
Absolutely. That's a really amazing question. Yes, it is you do feel like you're letting other people down, because when people see you a certain way your whole life and you start to change, they say, what's going on? What's wrong with you? And it's funny, another trainer and I at the gym were just having this exact conversation, like what's the best way to handle change, physical change, aging, for instance. We're all going to look different. It's not easy. For that, I'm going to have to use the acceptance, spiritual tools, and realize that I'm not the body. It's a spirit. That's why I love spirituality, and I think aging helps us do this. We're very, very physical creatures, and our 20s and 30s, and then you have to move out of spirit because the carriage is starting to wither a little bit. And I think that's why it's really important to get a foundation and some sort of and I don't mean religious belief in God or whatever. This spirituality is what works for you. I mean, it just means it's not me. That's going to be a tough one.
That's awesome. You'll have to keep us updated with that. And when you work it out, let us all know, because I'm sure we're all struggling with it.
Yeah.
But I've got to ask you a question that I ask all our guests on the show. And actually, I'm not even going to ask because I know the answer. And the question is, do you have a tattoo? I think it's quite obvious that you do, especially if you guys are looking on YouTube at the moment. But maybe we can just tell us about your tattoo, but without going into too much detail, maybe even choosing one, because they're absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually my life story. I can tell you very quickly. People ask me how many I have. I have no idea, because it's probably one giant piece from my feet all the way up. The monarchs are my sobriety, and I was clinically dead twice from heroin, so I have skulls. And I have a lot of poppies, and that's for the heroin. My back, I have some hummingbirds, and that represented Cirque, and everyone's super fast flying around. And in their watercolor paint tattoos.
Can you show us the hummingbirds?
Yeah.
Turn around.
Yeah. And they're all watercolor style, so there's a painting kind of.
Right.
And there's a wolf under there as well.
Oh, wow.
Can you see him?
Yeah.
All right.
And what's the wolf mean?
That was just me being the lone wolf through life. Wah, 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 angry teen.
Amazing.
Yeah, I like them.
And that covers all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I have things here and there. The Angel of Death, my favorite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they're going down my legs.
Well, don't show us below the belt. That's fine. Look, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story, and it's inspiring. And if you want some more inspiration, our listeners can go and get your book, Acrobaddict. I love the wording.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.